I never thought my construction business would become the target of a suburban tyrant in a cardigan. But here I was, standing in my driveway in Burlington, Vermont, staring at a pink violation notice that had just been taped to my garage door. My name is Zachary Yates, and I had spent the last 15 years building a solid excavation company from the ground up. When I finally saved enough to buy a house in the Maple Ridge community, I thought I had made it. The neighborhood looked perfect with its neat rows of colonial-style homes, well-maintained lawns, and that promised sense of security that comes with an HOA. I should have known better. Nothing that looks too perfect ever is. The notice flapped in the February wind as I tore it down, my breath forming clouds in the frigid air. It was 6 in the morning, and I had just finished clearing my driveway along with 3 of my elderly neighbors' driveways using my compact excavator. The machine sat quietly in my driveway now, snow still clinging to its bucket, evidence of the good deed that had apparently warranted a $500 fine. I read the citation again, my jaw clenching tighter with each word. Violation of HOA Code Section 14.3, use of commercial equipment on residential property without prior board approval. Fine, $500, payable within 14 days. The sun was barely peeking over the horizon when my phone rang. It was Mrs. Patterson from 3 houses down, the sweet 78-year-old woman whose driveway I had just cleared. She was calling to thank me, her voice warm and grateful. I told her not to worry about it, but I did not mention the fine. No point in making her feel bad about something that was not her fault. By 8 o'clock, I was standing in my kitchen, coffee in hand, when I saw her walking up my freshly cleared driveway. Patricia Henderson, president of the Maple Ridge HOA, professional busybody, and apparently my new nemesis. She wore a cream-colored puffer jacket and boots that had probably never seen actual snow before this winter. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tight it probably gave her a headache, and she carried a leather portfolio like she was about to close a corporate merger instead of harassing a neighbor. I opened the door before she could ring the bell. Let me guess, you are here to explain why helping my elderly neighbors is a crime. Patricia's smile was practiced and cold. Mr. Yates, this is not about helping neighbors. This is about maintaining community standards. Your excavator is commercial equipment. The CC and Articus are very clear. The CC and Articus are also clear that driveways need to be cleared within 24 hours of snowfall, I countered. Mrs. Patterson cannot physically shovel her driveway. Mr. Chen has a bad back. Were they supposed to hire someone and wait days for service? We got 14 inches last night. There are approved snow removal services, Patricia said, her tone suggesting she was explaining something simple to a child. Your excavator is an eyesore and completely inappropriate for residential use. It's a compact excavator. It weighs less than some subs. I used it for 30 minutes total. The rules exist for a reason. She adjusted her portfolio. The fine stands. You can appeal to the board at next month's meeting if you wish, but I would not recommend wasting your time. The vote will not go your way. I watched her walk back down my driveway, her boots crunching on the packed snow I had cleared. Something about her casual dismissal, the way she wielded those HOA rules like weapons, made my blood boil. But I was not about to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. The real kicker came 3 days later. Another massive storm was forecast to hit Burlington, and this one looked serious. The Weather Service was predicting 20 to 30 inches with possible whiteout conditions. I was preparing my equipment at the shop when my phone started buzzing with texts from neighbors. Mrs. Patterson. Mr. Chen. Even the Kowalskis from the corner lot. They were all asking if I could help clear their driveways again after the storm. I wanted to help. Every instinct I had said to do the right thing. But that $500 fine sat on my kitchen counter, and I knew Patricia would not hesitate to issue another one. Or two. Or however many it took to make her point. That evening I drove to Mrs. Patterson's house with a check for the fine. I wanted to pay it in person, wanted to look Patricia in the eye and tell her exactly what I thought of her and her petty power trip. But when I rang the doorbell, it was her husband who answered. Gerald Henderson was a quiet man, mid-50s, with tired eyes and the demeanor of someone who had given up fighting battles long ago. "She is not here," he said, taking the check. "HOA meeting at the community center." "Tell her I paid the fine," I said. "And tell her I will not be using my excavator in the neighborhood anymore." She got what she wanted. Gerald looked at the check, then at me. "You were helping people. Patricia knows that. She just cares more about being right than being decent." It was the most honest thing anyone had said to me in weeks. I nodded and left, the weight of the decision settling on my shoulders as I drove home. The storm hit on a Thursday night. I was at home, watching the snow pile up through my window, listening to the wind howl like a living thing trying to get inside. The weather service had not been exaggerating. By midnight, visibility was 0. By morning, the snow had completely transformed the neighborhood into something unrecognizable. I woke up at dawn and looked outside. My truck was buried up to its door handles. The street was impassable. Snow had drifted against garage doors, creating walls 3 and 4 feet high. It was the kind of storm that made you remember why people in Vermont kept emergency supplies and generators. My phone started ringing at 7. Mrs. Patterson. She was crying. "Zachary, I cannot get out. My front door is blocked." I tried calling the emergency number for snow removal, but they said it could be 3 or 4 days before they can get to residential areas. The main roads are priority. I felt that familiar pull, the instinct to grab my keys and fire up the excavator. But then I remembered Patricia Henderson standing in my driveway, her cold smile, her casual dismissal of basic human decency in favor of her precious rules. "I am sorry, Mrs. Patterson," I said quietly, "but I got fined last time for using commercial equipment. I cannot help." "But this is an emergency." "Then call the HOA. They have approved vendors for this sort of thing, right?" The silence on the other end told me she understood. I had not raised my voice. I had not been cruel. I had simply repeated the logic that had been used against me. Mr. Chen called next. Then the Kowalskis. Then 3 other families I had helped before. Each call was harder than the last. These were not bad people. They were just stuck, victims of geography and weather and an HOA president who cared more about rules than reality. By noon, my phone rang again. This time it was Patricia Henderson herself. "Mr. Yates, I understand you are refusing to help your neighbors." Her voice was sharp, accusatory. "I am following HOA rules," I replied calmly. "No commercial equipment on residential property without board approval. Those are your words, Mrs. Henderson. This is an emergency situation. Surely you can see that this is different." So when I help elderly neighbors who cannot physically clear their own driveways, that is a violation. But when you need help, suddenly the rules do not matter. I could fine you for refusing to maintain your property. My property is maintained according to HOA standards. My driveway will be cleared within 24 hours of the end of snowfall, as required. The storm has not stopped yet, so technically I have time. I could hear her breathing on the other end, could practically feel the rage radiating through the phone. "You are being petty." "I am being compliant," I corrected. "Is not that what you wanted?" She hung up. I sat in my kitchen, coffee growing cold in my mug, and I did not feel victorious. I felt tired. Outside my window, snow continued to fall, and somewhere in this buried neighborhood, elderly people were trapped, worried, and alone. By evening, the snow finally stopped. 32 inches had fallen, setting a local record. The neighborhood looked like something from a disaster movie. Cars were completely buried. Some houses had snow halfway up their first-floor windows. The street was invisible under uniform white. I kept my word. I grabbed a shovel and started clearing my driveway by hand. It was back-breaking work, the kind that makes you remember every year of your age. My excavator sat in my garage, perfectly capable of clearing my driveway in 20 minutes. Instead, I spent 3 hours moving snow one shovel full at a time. Mrs. Patterson called again as the sun was setting. "Please, Zachary, I am scared. My daughter cannot get here. The roads are not cleared. My medications are running low." That hit me hard. "What medications?" "Blood pressure, heart medication." "I have enough for tomorrow, maybe the day after if I ration them." I closed my eyes. This was not about winning anymore. This was about someone's life. "I will make some calls. Let me see what I can do." I spent the next hour calling every snow removal service in Burlington and the surrounding areas. They were all booked solid, crews working around the clock on emergency routes, hospitals, fire stations. Residential areas were at the bottom of the priority list. The earliest anyone could reach Maple Ridge was 4 days out, maybe 5. I called Mrs. Patterson back with the news. She was silent for a long moment. "So I am just stuck here." "We are all stuck." "I can try to shovel a path to your door," I offered. "It will take a while, but I can do it." "With your excavator, you could clear the whole street in a few hours," she said quietly. "And get fined another $500, maybe more. Patricia made it very clear that commercial equipment is not allowed." "I am Patricia," she said, confused. I blinked, my tired brain finally catching up. "Wrong Patricia." "I am sorry, Mrs. Patterson. I meant Henderson. Patricia Henderson." "Oh, her." The elderly woman's voice took on a bitter edge. "She lives on the corner lot. Her driveway faces south, gets full sun. Snow there melts faster than anywhere else. She is probably fine." I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the weather. I bundled up, grabbed a flashlight, and walked down the street. Well, tried to. Walking was generous. I post-holed through waist-deep snow, climbed over drifts, and nearly fell twice. It took me 20 minutes to travel 3 blocks. Patricia Henderson's house sat pristine on its corner lot. Mrs. Patterson had been right. The southern exposure and natural wind patterns had kept her driveway relatively clear. Maybe 8 inches of accumulation compared to the 3 feet everywhere else. Her husband's SUV sat in the driveway, and lights glowed warmly in every window. She was not trapped. She was not suffering. She was perfectly fine. I stood there in the dark, snow falling softly around me, and felt something shift inside. This was not about rules or property values. This was about power. Patricia Henderson had found a way to control an entire neighborhood, to dictate terms, to make people comply with arbitrary rules that she did not even have to follow herself. The next morning, I got a call from Tom Rodriguez, one of my neighbors I did not know well. He was a contractor, mid-40s with 3 kids. "Zachary, we got a problem. The main water line on Birch Street froze and burst. Water is flooding the street, freezing solid. If we do not get equipment in here to clear the snow and access the shutoff, it's going to damage foundations." "Call the city," I said. I did. "They are overwhelmed. Every crew is on emergency calls. They said it would be at least 48 hours. "Then call the HOA." I did. Patricia said there's nothing she can do. The approved vendors are all busy. I was quiet for a moment. How bad is the flooding? Bad enough that my basement is starting to take on water. The Martinses next door have it worse. It's going to cause thousands in damage if we do not stop it soon. I thought about my excavator. I thought about the $500 fine sitting on my counter, paid and processed. I thought about Patricia Henderson in her warm house on her clear corner lot, wielding rules like weapons while her neighbors suffered. "I am coming," I said. It took me an hour to dig out my truck and trailer. Another hour to load the excavator and navigate the partially cleared main roads to reach the neighborhood entrance. The streets inside Maple Ridge were impassable to normal vehicles, but my truck had seen worse. I drove slowly, carefully, following Tom's directions to Birch Street. The scene was worse than I expected. Water gushed from a crack in the asphalt, flooding the street and freezing almost instantly in the sub-zero temperatures. 3 houses already had water creeping toward their foundations. I could see the panic on people's faces as they watched, helpless. I unloaded the excavator and got to work. First, I cleared the snow around the water main access point. Then I used the bucket to carefully remove the ice buildup. Tom and 2 other neighbors worked on shutting off the water once I exposed the valve. Within 90 minutes, the flooding had stopped. But I was not done. I looked at the street, at the buried cars and impassable driveways. I looked at the faces of my neighbors, people I had waved to and chatted with over the past 2 years. They were scared. They were trapped, and they needed help. I started clearing driveways. Mrs. Patterson's first, then Mr. Chen's, then the Kowalskis. I worked methodically, efficiently, the excavator's engine purring steadily as I moved snow into massive piles on the curb. People came out of their houses, some crying with relief, others cheering. A few offered to pay me, but I refused. This was not about money. I was halfway down the street when Patricia Henderson's silver BMW pulled up. She must have been out, must have managed to leave the neighborhood before I arrived. She climbed out of her car, her face red with anger, and marched toward me like a general approaching a battlefield. I shut off the excavator and climbed down. Around us, neighbors had stopped to watch. Some were filming on their phones. Everyone knew what was coming. "What do you think you are doing?" Patricia demanded. "You are in direct violation of HOA codes." "I am preventing property damage," I said calmly. "The water main burst. If I had not cleared access, 6 homes would have flooded basements by now." "That does not give you the right to violate community standards. You are using commercial equipment without approval." Tom Rodriguez stepped forward. "He saved our homes, Patricia. Maybe show a little gratitude instead of citing codes." "The codes exist for a reason," she snapped. "We cannot just ignore them whenever it is convenient." "You mean like how your driveway is always clear because of its position?" I asked. "Or how you do not have to worry about being trapped because you can actually leave your house?" Patricia's face went red. "That is not relevant. The rules apply to everyone equally." "Except they do not," Mrs. Patterson said, shuffling through the snow I had cleared. She had bundled up and walked down to join us. "You fine this young man for helping people, but when we need help, where is the HOA? Where are these approved vendors you keep talking about? Emergency services are overwhelmed," Patricia said defensively. "That is not the HOA's fault. But it is the HOA's fault that the one person with the equipment and willingness to help gets punished for it," Mr. Chen added. He had come down too, leaning on his cane. More neighbors were gathering now, forming a semicircle around us. Patricia looked around, seemed to realize she was outnumbered, and shifted tactics. "Fine. Mr. Yates, I will waive the fine for today given the emergency circumstances. But this is a one-time exception. Any future use of commercial equipment will result in escalating fines and possible legal action." "No, I said quietly. Everyone went silent. Patricia stared at me. "Excuse me," I said. "No, I am not accepting your exception. You either change the rules or you do not. I'm not going to wait for your approval every time someone needs help. Then you will be fined. The board will back me on this. Then I will see you at the next board meeting," I said, "and I will bring every person whose driveway I cleared today. We will see how the board votes when the entire neighborhood is watching." Patricia's jaw worked silently for a moment. Then she turned and stalked back to her car, the BMW's tires spinning slightly in the snow I had not yet cleared from her path. I watched her go, then climbed back onto the excavator and got back to work. The next 3 days were a blur. I cleared every driveway in Maple Ridge, every single one, including Patricia Henderson's, though I admit I might have left her pile a little higher than strictly necessary. I worked from dawn until dark, stopping only to refuel and grab food. Neighbors brought me coffee and sandwiches. Kids waved at me like I was driving a parade float. It felt good to help, to use my skills and equipment for something that mattered. The fines started arriving on day 2. $500 for the first day, $500 for the second. By the end of the third day, I had racked up $1,500 in HOA violations. Patricia was nothing if not consistent, but something had shifted in the neighborhood. People were talking. I started getting emails and text messages from other homeowners, all expressing support, all saying they would attend the next board meeting. Some were circulating a petition to change the commercial equipment rule. Others were calling for Patricia's removal as HOA president. The board meeting was scheduled for the first Tuesday of March. It was held in the community center, a nice building with a big meeting room and folding chairs that had seen better days. Normally, these meetings drew maybe a dozen people, mostly the board members themselves and a few residents with specific complaints. This time, the room was packed. Every chair was filled, people lined the walls, and some had to stand in the hallway. I counted at least 60 residents, maybe more. Patricia sat at the front table with the other 4 board members, her face carefully neutral but her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. The meeting started with standard business: budget reports, landscaping contracts, pool maintenance for the summer. Patricia rushed through it all, clearly hoping people would get bored and leave. Nobody moved. When we reached new business, I raised my hand. Patricia tried to ignore me, but the crowd would not let her. People started calling my name, demanding I be heard. Finally, she acknowledged me. "Mr. Yates, you have the floor." I stood up, suddenly aware of every eye in the room on me. "I am here to address the fines I received for using my excavator to clear snow. Specifically, I want to discuss the logic behind a rule that punishes residents for helping their neighbors during emergencies. The rule is designed to maintain property values and community aesthetics," Patricia said, reading from a paper in front of her. "Commercial equipment is loud, unsightly, and not appropriate for residential areas. My excavator is quieter than most lawn mowers," I countered. "I used it during reasonable hours, and the only people who complained were you and the board, not the actual neighbors whose driveways I cleared." "The rules are not subject to popularity votes," Patricia said coldly. "They are binding provisions agreed to by all homeowners when they purchased property here." Mrs. Patterson stood up, her voice shaky but determined. "I could not leave my house for 3 days. My medication was running out. Zachary cleared my driveway and probably saved my life, and you want to fine him for it." "Emergency services should have been called," Patricia replied. "They were," Mr. Chen called out. "They told us it would be 4 or 5 days. What were we supposed to do, freeze to death while we waited?" The room erupted in agreement, voices overlapping as residents shared their own experiences from the storm. Patricia banged a gavel, calling for order, but the momentum had shifted. This was not her meeting anymore. It belonged to the community. One of the other board members, a woman named Susan Jacobs, leaned forward. "Patricia, maybe we should consider revising the commercial equipment policy. Clearly, there are circumstances where it benefits the community." "The policy is fine as written," Patricia insisted. "People just need to plan better." "Plan better." Tom Rodriguez stood up, his face incredulous. "How exactly do you plan for a record-breaking blizzard that strands emergency services for days?" Patricia's face was bright red now. "Mr. Yates chose to bring commercial equipment into a residential neighborhood. He chose to violate the CC and Articus. Actions have consequences. And your actions as HOA president have consequences too," a voice called from the back. It was Gerald Henderson, Patricia's husband. The room went dead silent as he walked to the front, his face drawn. "I am sorry, Patricia, but I cannot support this anymore. Zachary helped people. He did not hurt anyone, and you have been using HOA rules to bully neighbors for 2 years now." Patricia looked like she had been slapped. "Gerald, sit down." "No." He turned to the board. "I have copies of every fine Patricia has issued since she became president. 53 violations in 24 months. Most of them minor, most of them issued to people who questioned her authority or disagreed with her decisions. She is using the HOA as a personal fiefdom, and it needs to stop." He handed a thick folder to Susan Jacobs, who opened it and started reading, her eyebrows rising higher with each page. The other board members leaned in to look, and I could see their expressions changing from confused to concerned to outright angry. Patricia stood abruptly. "This meeting is adjourned." "You do not get to adjourn unilaterally," Susan said, not looking up from the folder. "Board president is a position elected by the board, and I am calling for a vote of no confidence. Right now." "You cannot do that. Actually, according to the bylaws, any board member can call for such a vote with proper cause. I would say this folder full of petty, vindictive fines qualifies." "All in favor?" 4 hands went up. Patricia's did not. She was out. The room erupted in applause. Patricia grabbed her things and stormed out, Gerald watching her go with something like relief on his face. Susan took over the meeting, and within 30 minutes, the board had voted to suspend all fines related to the snow removal incident and to form a committee to revise the commercial equipment policy. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 days later, I got a call from a number I did not recognize. It was a lawyer. Patricia Henderson had filed a civil suit against me for property damage, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was seeking $50,000 in damages. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the lawsuit papers that had been served that morning, and felt a familiar exhaustion settle over me. This was not over. Patricia had just changed tactics. I called my own lawyer, a guy named Mike Stevenson who had helped me with business contracts over the years. He reviewed the lawsuit and started laughing. Actually laughing. "This is garbage," he said. "She is claiming you damaged her property by creating excessive snow piles on the curb, snow that would have melted in spring anyway, and harassment. You cleared her driveway. Can she actually win this?" "Anything can happen in court, but this is frivolous. We will file a motion to dismiss, and I would be shocked if a judge does not throw it out immediately. Actually, we might be able to countersue for abuse of process." That made me feel slightly better, but the stress of the lawsuit hung over everything. I tried to focus on work, on the jobs my company had lined up for spring, but my mind kept drifting back to Patricia Henderson and her relentless need to punish me for helping people. The motion to dismiss was filed. Patricia's lawyer filed an opposition. Weeks dragged by as the legal system ground forward at its glacial pace. Meanwhile, the neighborhood had fully turned against Patricia. Someone started a GoFundMe to help with my legal fees and raised $10,000 in 3 days. Neighbors brought casseroles and offers of support. Gerald Henderson filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. The hearing was set for late April, and I showed up at the Chittenden County Courthouse in my best suit, feeling like I was walking into battle. Mike was confident, but I had learned that confidence does not always translate to victory in legal matters. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Barbara Thornton, and she did not look happy to be dealing with this case. She reviewed the motions, asked a few perfunctory questions, and then addressed Patricia's lawyer directly. "Counselor, help me understand how clearing snow from a public street and a client's driveway constitutes property damage." Patricia's lawyer, a young guy who looked fresh out of law school, stammered through an explanation about excessive snow piles and aesthetic concerns. Judge Thornton's expression grew more skeptical with each word. "And the harassment claim, my client has suffered significant emotional distress from Mr. Yates's actions and the subsequent community backlash. Backlash that resulted from her issuing fines to a man who was helping elderly neighbors during a blizzard." The judge looked over her glasses. "I have reviewed the case file. I have reviewed the HOA meeting minutes. This lawsuit appears to be retaliatory in nature. Your Honor, my client has every right to seek redress for genuine grievances. Genuine grievances require genuine damages. I am not seeing any here." Judge Thornton turned to Mike. "Does the defense wish to pursue a counterclaim?" Mike glanced at me. We had discussed this. I could go after Patricia for legal fees, for abuse of process, maybe even for the original HOA fines. But looking at Patricia sitting at the plaintiff's table, her face pale and drawn, I felt only tired. "No, Your Honor," I said before Mike could answer. "I just want this to be over." Judge Thornton nodded slowly. "Mr. Yates, that is gracious of you. Mrs. Henderson, your case is dismissed with prejudice. That means you cannot refile. I am also ordering you to pay Mr. Yates's legal fees to date, and I am strongly recommending you reconsider your approach to community involvement. This court does not look kindly on frivolous lawsuits designed to punish good deeds." The gavel came down, and it was done. Patricia left the courtroom without looking at anyone. I shook Mike's hand, thanked him, and walked out into the spring sunshine feeling like I could breathe for the first time in months. But the story was not quite finished. A week later, I got an email from Susan Jacobs, now serving as the HOA board president. She wanted to meet, said it was important. I agreed, curious and cautiously optimistic. We met at a coffee shop in downtown Burlington, neutral territory away from Maple Ridge. Susan was in her 40s, a pediatric nurse with 2 kids, and a no-nonsense attitude I respected. "I want to apologize," she said without preamble. "The board failed you and the community. We let Patricia run unchecked for too long because none of us wanted to deal with the conflict. That was cowardly and it was wrong. You fixed it," I said. "That takes courage too." "Maybe, but we should have acted sooner. Anyway, I wanted to update you. The new commercial equipment policy passed unanimously. Residents can use appropriate equipment for property maintenance and emergency situations, as long as it is during reasonable hours and does not cause actual damage. We have also revised the fine structure to require board approval for any fine over $50, and residents can appeal directly to the full board instead of just the president. That sounds reasonable. It is what we should have had all along. Also, the community voted to reimburse your original $500 fine. You will get a check in the mail. I had not expected that. Thank you. Really? Susan smiled. Thank you for not giving up on the neighborhood. A lot of people would have moved or just kept their heads down. You stood up, and it made a difference. We talked for another hour, discussing ideas for improving community engagement and making the HOA actually serve the residents instead of controlling them. It was the kind of conversation that gave me hope, the kind that reminded me why I had wanted to live in a community in the first place. Summer came, and Maple Ridge transformed. People were outside more, actually talking to each other instead of just coexisting. The pool opened, block parties were organized, and someone started a community garden. I still got waves and thank yous from neighbors who remembered the blizzard. Patricia Henderson moved away in July. The divorce had been finalized, and Gerald got the house. He was friendly, quieter than before, but with a lightness about him that had not been there when Patricia was around. He told me once over beers that leaving had been the hardest thing he had ever done, but he did not regret it. Some relationships were like drowning, he said. You do not realize how hard it was to breathe until you surface. I never saw Patricia again after the courthouse. I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that she had moved to Florida, had joined another HOA board down there. I felt sorry for them, but figured they would figure out soon enough what they were dealing with. As for me, life went back to normal. My excavation business stayed busy through the summer and fall. I dated a teacher named Beth Norton who lived 2 streets over, and we became serious enough that she started keeping a toothbrush at my place. The HOA actually became helpful, organizing neighborhood cleanups and holiday events that people genuinely enjoyed. When winter rolled around again, I watched the first snowfall with a mix of anticipation and memory. I had my excavator ready, properly stored in my garage but available if needed. The forecast was not calling for anything dramatic, just the normal Vermont winter, but I was prepared either way. Mrs. Patterson called me the morning after the first real snow, just to chat. Her daughter had moved closer, just 1 town over, so she was not as isolated this year. But she wanted to thank me again, said she thought about those scary days often and how grateful she was that someone had cared enough to stand up. I told her it was nothing, just the right thing to do. But sitting in my kitchen after the call, I realized it had been more than that. It had been a reminder that rules without compassion are just control. That communities are built on people helping each other, not on enforcement and compliance. That sometimes standing up means accepting consequences and trusting that others will recognize what is right. My phone buzzed with a text from Beth. "Dinner tonight? I am making that pasta you like." I smiled and texted back a yes. Outside, kids were building a snowman in someone's front yard. A neighbor was shoveling his driveway, waving at people passing by. The street looked peaceful, normal, the way a neighborhood should look. I thought about Patricia sometimes, about how someone could become so consumed by the need for control that they lost sight of basic humanity. I thought about how close I had come to just accepting it, to paying the fines and keeping my head down. I thought about the choice I made instead, to stop helping and watch what happened when rules collided with reality. It had not been pretty. People had suffered, including people I cared about. But it had forced a reckoning, had made the community confront what kind of place they wanted to live in. And in the end, they had chosen connection over compliance, compassion over control. The HOA still existed. Rules still mattered. But now they served the community instead of ruling it. Susan's leadership had made a real difference, and the board actually listened to residents now. They even asked my opinion sometimes about snow removal logistics and equipment, which made me laugh. A year ago, they were fining me for having an excavator. Now they wanted my expertise. I spent that winter ready to help, but the storms were mild. A few inches here and there, nothing like the previous year's monster blizzard. My excavator stayed mostly unused, though I did help Mrs. Patterson once when she had a particularly nasty drift blocking her garage. No fines, no drama. Just a neighbor helping a neighbor. Spring came early and I found myself in my backyard one Saturday afternoon, grilling burgers for a small group of neighbors. Tom Rodriguez and his kids, the Kowalskis, Mr. Chen, who brought amazing homemade dumplings. Beth, who fit into my life so naturally it was like she had always been there. Gerald Henderson showed up too, bringing craft beer and stories about his new job at a tech startup. He seemed younger somehow, unburdened. He pulled me aside at one point, his expression serious. "I never properly thanked you," he said, "for what you did. The snow removal thing, standing up to Patricia, all of it. It made me realize I had been enabling her behavior for years. Watching you refuse to back down gave me the courage to finally leave." "I am glad you got out," I said honestly. "Nobody should have to live like that. She was not always like that, you know. When we first married, she was different. But somewhere along the way, she found she could control things through rules and regulations, and it became an addiction. The more power she got, the more she needed. The HOA presidency was just the latest expression of it." "Think she will get help?" Gerald shrugged. "I do not know. I hope so, but that is not my responsibility anymore. I did my time trying to save someone who did not want to be saved." We stood quietly for a moment, watching the others laugh and talk, the smell of grilling meat mixing with the spring flowers blooming around the yard. This, I thought, was what community was supposed to be. Not perfect, not without disagreements or challenges, but fundamentally rooted in mutual respect and care. The legal fees that Patricia had been ordered to pay came through eventually, after her lawyer exhausted all his appeals and delay tactics. It was not a fortune, but it covered Mike's bills and then some. I donated the excess to a local charity that helped elderly residents with home maintenance. It seemed like the right way to close that chapter. The next HOA election came in the fall, and the community actually paid attention this time. Multiple people ran for board positions. There were debates, discussions, actual democracy happening. I even considered running but decided against it. I was not a bureaucrat or an organizer. I was a guy with an excavator who wanted to help when needed. That was enough. Beth and I got engaged on New Year's Eve, and Mrs. Patterson cried when we told her. She insisted on throwing an engagement party, which turned into a neighborhood celebration with more than 40 people cramming into her modest living room. It was chaotic and loud and perfect. Someone asked me that night if I regretted the whole HOA situation, if I wished it had never happened. I thought about it, really thought about it. The stress, the fines, the lawsuit, all of it. "No," I said finally. "It sucked at the time, but it taught me something important. It is easy to help when there are no consequences. The real test is whether you are willing to stop helping and let people face the results of bad rules and bad leadership. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is step back and let reality teach the lesson you cannot." "That is pretty philosophical for a guy who drives an excavator," someone joked, and everyone laughed, including me. But I meant it. Patricia Henderson had taught me that sometimes you have to let people feel the weight of their choices. That you cannot care more about someone's well-being than they do about basic decency. That standing up sometimes means sitting down and watching what happens when you are not there to fix everything. The blizzard had buried us all, but in the end, it had also revealed who we really were. a community that came together, neighbors who supported each other, and one woman so consumed by control that she lost everything trying to maintain it. I looked around at the faces in Mrs. Patterson's living room, at Beth beside me, at the life I had built in this neighborhood despite everything. This was worth fighting for. Not the rules or the property values or the perfect lawns. The people. The connections. The moments like this when everyone gathered just because they wanted to be together. My excavator sat in my garage, clean and maintained, ready for the next emergency. But more importantly, I was ready too. Ready to help, ready to stand up and, if necessary, ready to step back and let consequences teach their lessons. That balance, I had learned, was the real key to community. Winter would come again. Snow would fall. And whatever happened, I knew this neighborhood would handle it together. Not because of HOA rules or approved vendor lists, but because we had learned what really mattered. And no fine, no lawsuit, no petty tyrant with a gavel could take that away from us. The night wound down eventually, people heading home in clusters, calling out goodbyes and making plans for next weekend. Beth and I were among the last to leave, helping Mrs. Patterson clean up despite her protests. "You two are going to be so happy," she said, hugging us both. "You deserve it, Zachary. After everything, you deserve all the good things." Walking home through the quiet streets, Beth's hand warm in mine, I thought about deserving. I had not done anything extraordinary. I had just used the equipment I owned to help people who needed it. But somehow that simple act had become a catalyst for change, had forced an entire community to examine its values and priorities. The houses around us were dark, families asleep, the neighborhood peaceful. Tomorrow would bring whatever it brought. More snow eventually, more challenges, more opportunities to choose between convenience and character. But tonight, everything was exactly as it should be. I never did get an apology from Patricia. Never expected one, really. Some people go through life never understanding the damage they cause, never recognizing that power without wisdom is just tyranny with better letterhead. Maybe she was happy in Florida. Maybe she had learned something. Or maybe she was terrorizing a new neighborhood with fines and violations and petty exercises of authority. That was not my problem anymore. I had my own life to live, my own community to be part of, my own future to build with Beth. The HOA drama was just a story now, one I would tell our kids someday about the winter everything changed. We reached my house, and I looked at it with fresh appreciation. Just a normal colonial in a normal neighborhood, but it represented something more now. Freedom to help others. Connection to community. The knowledge that standing up for what is right, even when it is hard, even when it costs you something, is always worth it in the end. Inside, we kicked off our shoes and collapsed on the couch, exhausted and happy. Beth leaned against me, and I wrapped my arm around her shoulders, feeling completely content. "Tell me again about the blizzard," she said. She had heard the story before, but she liked making me tell it, liked hearing about the moment I decided to stop clearing snow and let Patricia Henderson face the consequences of her own rules. So I told her about the fines and the phone calls and the hard choice to help or to step back. About watching the neighborhood get buried and knowing I could fix it but choosing not to. About the board meeting and the lawsuit and the slow, grinding process of change. "You are my hero," Beth said when I finished, but she was smiling, making it light even though I could tell she meant it. "I am just a guy with an excavator," I replied, the same response I always gave. "No," she said, more seriously now. "You are a guy who knew when to use the excavator and when to put it away. That is wisdom, Zachary, that matters." Maybe she was right. I did not feel particularly wise most days, but I had learned something valuable that winter. That helping people is important, but so is teaching them to stand up for themselves. That sometimes the best thing you can do for a community is stop doing things for them and make them confront their own problems. Patricia Henderson had wanted control. She had gotten it for a while. But control built on intimidation and petty rules always crumbles eventually. Real leadership, real community, comes from mutual respect and shared values. The new HOA board understood that. The neighborhood understood that. Even I understood it now, though it had taken getting fined and sued to learn the lesson. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, the house warm around us, the winter night cold outside. My excavator was in the garage. My neighbors were safe in their homes, and I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was Susan Jacobs, and for a moment, I felt a spike of anxiety. Had something happened? Was there a new problem with the HOA? "Morning, Zachary," she said cheerfully. "Sorry to call early. I wanted to catch you before you started your day. We are having a neighborhood appreciation event next month, and the board voted unanimously to give you a community service award for your actions during last year's blizzard. Will you accept?" I was quiet for a moment, processing. "You do not have to do that. We want to. You made a difference. Not just with the snow removal, but with standing up to a system that was not working. That is worth recognizing." I agreed, mainly because refusing would have made a bigger deal out of it than accepting. The award ceremony was nice, held at the community center with most of the neighborhood attending. They gave me a plaque with a little excavator engraved on it, and I gave a short speech about community and helping each other. It felt good, being recognized not for compliance but for doing the right thing even when it was hard. Life moved forward. Seasons changed. Beth and I got married in a small ceremony that fall with half the neighborhood attending. Mrs. Patterson caught the bouquet, which made everyone laugh and her blush. We bought a bigger house, still in Maple Ridge, with a larger garage for my growing equipment collection. The HOA became what it should have always been. A helpful organizing body that maintained common areas and facilitated community events without overreaching into people's lives. Susan served 2 terms as president before handing off to Tom Rodriguez, who brought his contractor's practicality to the role. I still had my excavator, still helped neighbors when they needed it. The difference was that now it was appreciated and encouraged rather than punished. The community even asked me to be on call for snow emergencies, making it official rather than something I did secretly in violation of arcane rules. And Patricia Henderson. I heard she got removed from her Florida HOA board after similar drama. Then she moved again, and I lost track of her. Some people never learn. They just find new places to exercise their need for control until those places, too, finally push back. But that was not my story anymore. My story was Beth and our plans for a family. My story was Mrs. Patterson's 80th birthday party and Mr. Chen finally getting his hip replacement, and the Kowalski's daughter graduating from college. My story was a community that had learned to value people over rules, connection over control. On quiet evenings, I sometimes sat in my garage, looking at my excavator, remembering that winter when everything changed. The machine sat silent and powerful, ready for the next time it was needed, just like me, just like all of us, really. Ready to help when called upon, but also ready to step back and let people learn their own lessons. That was the real gift Patricia Henderson had given me, though she never intended it. She taught me that not all help is helpful, that sometimes people need to face consequences, that standing up sometimes looks like sitting down, that the most important thing you can do for a community is believe in its ability to save itself, the snow would fall again. It always did in Vermont, and when it did, I would be ready. Not as a rule breaker or a rebel, but as a neighbor with equipment and the wisdom to know when to use it. That was enough. That was everything.